We pillaged and burned. They thought we were demons. The details of the memory were so vivid. I lost myself in the bloodlust. I defeated a Saxon, a great warrior, but did not want to kill him. I invited him to join our clan. Hello, and welcome to Visions of the Past, an Assassin's Creed lore podcast. My name is Andrew, and I'm glad to see that you found this podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the era that Juhani Atzoberg was talking about with that quote, the Viking Age. But before we get into the Viking Age, I want to introduce a special guest from Let's Talk Assassin's Creed, Declan Rose.
Hola.
Been wanting to do this for a while. I'm glad we finally found some time to get it to do it.
Especially me from being from sunny UK and you from America.
The reason I wanted to talk about Viking Age with Declan is because of that little unconfirmed rumor from Jason Schreiber of Kotaku that the next setting for Assassin's Creed will be the Viking Age. But at the same time, we've already been there within the lore, most notably in Assassin's Creed Rogue and the novel Assassin's Creed Last Descendants, Fate of the Gods. What little we do know about the lore is that Juhani Atzoberg had an ancestor that participated in the raid on Linden's farm in 793, and one of the daggers of Eden that formed a trident of Eden was in the possession of a Templar and the King of Denmark and Norway, Harald Bluetooth Gorm's son, sometime around 965. The dagger would also go through the hands of the assassin Thorvald Haltzinson, eventually becoming lost to time sometime after 984 until it was found in 2016. As you can see, with so little that we know within the lore, the game could go just about anywhere. And that's really what I wanted to talk about today. What it could touch on, where it could go, and why it would be interesting to see. The Viking Age historically is a vast time period between 793 and 1066. The age historically started with the Viking raid on Linden's farm, though the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle reported that the earliest raid was on the Isle of Portland in Dorset in 789. And the ending came around 1066 with the Battle of Stamford Bridge, where the last crowned Anglo-Saxon king of England, Harold Godwinson, stopped an invasion from the Norwegian king, Harald Hardrada, who was more commonly known as Harold III. Although there are other battles after Stamford Bridge, this is usually considered the end of the Viking Age. Where would we go? We've already been covered that time period shortly, kind of near the end, around 965. So sure, you got 100 years after that. Where would you think the best point of the time period to go?
Ironically, I think the best time frame would be the same time frame as the Last Descendants novel with the Fear Prong. I think that'd be the perfect time for them actually to build on, because they're already setting up an Isu-themed modern-day story with Odyssey. And it makes logic sense for the next game to have heavy Isu feel to it as well.
Do you think that dagger will be a central point, or kind of hey, we're kind of like an Easter egg kind of nod to it? Kind of like saying we're still reading everything's still canon?
I think how I was imagining it, and I explained in my first highlight with the new animation series that's coming, my theory has been that we don't play when Harold gets the dagger. We play as a lead up, maybe how it fell into King Harold's hands, which then would tie into the Last Descendants novel. So it's basically something that happens that will lead into the Descendants novel that they could probably put into an animation round about that time, and then that'll just tie everything together, and it will make a bit more canon sense. Because at the moment, the only comics that make no sense is The Last Descendants. Like, with the other comics...
Oh, that Lotus. If I remember right, the novel, because there's that trilogy of novels, I believe Fate of the Gods, that novel, started with the Fear Prong being with a priest?
I believe so.
So that could, how it fell into that priest's hands would be a good point, because you know nothing from the point when the trident was whole with Alexander the Great up into the priest has it. That's almost 1,000 years.
Yeah, so it's quite a big lore gap, but I think it would make sense as well is a lot of the other comics tie into the current games, like the main series with Charlotte Cruz worked with Layla Hassan in the background. So that's the comic connecting with the games. But the Fear of the Gods novel doesn't connect with the games. It's just passing characters. So it might be a good idea for
That's
Ubisoft to link.
they did. Dr. Babot, Victoria, she's in the Last Descendants novels.
So yeah.
And I think she was a double agent, because within the novels she was content being a Templar.
So see, this is why personally the novel's side acting isn't very well perceived, because a lot of my knowledge comes from wiki entries because I don't have access to the novels, and a lot of fans will be like me. So I think maybe it's high time Ubisoft finds a way to bridge the comics with a wider audience, so fans could potentially see the effects of the comics on the real world games that we're playing now, and this Viking one could serve as a way to bridge that little gap.
I agree. Because we'd have so many things that aren't mentioned. Like, for instance, we get the statue of Amunet in Assassin's Creed 2, but within that idea, I know this is a little off topic, but within that idea, when AC2 first came out, we were under the assumption that her body was in goodness, I don't even remember, in Venice. I remember it was one of the churches in Venice. But then we find Layla finding her body in the cave in Egypt. So what's really in that tomb, and are all 6 of them like that?
Which is kind of an interesting point. What's been leading up to it?
So that's just kind of one small thing that we could pick apart from the soft reboot, and how it all is supposed to still be canon but not be canon at the same time.
Yeah, it's a tricky bridge.
I have to mention this. Have you studied those statues?
I studied a little bit of them, especially with the run up to Origins, because Origins had the same fear in my heart that the new game has, where we have an established law prior to the games and how it will affect it. So when I heard rumors there was going to be Aya in Origins before it was released, I was panicking with Anuet connection in Assassin's Creed 2. So I did some research on her, but other than that, I didn't do much research on them.
Next time you go in there, take a look at how Darius' statue is wearing his blade. He's wearing it underneath his arm. This kind of ties into how Aya gets the blade. She says she gets it from Cleopatra, though historically it's hers by birthright. But they put it on him wrong. That's why it cuts Bayek's finger off, because it's incorrectly on his wrist. If he'd have worn it right, he wouldn't have known that. So much time had passed, they forgot how to use it. So when they commission that statue, they put it underneath his wrist instead of on top of it. At least that's my headcanon on how that worked out.
It makes sense because Layla Hassan uses Bayek's same hidden blade in the modern day segments, and using the bleeding effect, she was able to wield it without cutting a finger. And
Yep.
this is prior to the false knowledge that Leonardo da Vinci is the one that re-edited it, when it was actually Altair who originally re-edited it.
Based on his plans in the Codex, yep.
Which, in actual fact, the Codex could have actually been a pre-information from Darius, so similar to how
I think that's all his Codex is information out of the apple,
which Darius could have come into contact with.
True, could have. We're way off topic, but yeah, you're right.
Welcome to me.
So while we're talking about the time period itself, I don't know much about like specific battles. Let's take a thought process on the map, as I did some looking at what it was like. They went, they raided, and they came back. So we have this really large map of Greece from Odyssey. I was thinking was that instead of the Aegean Sea, we'd get the North Sea, possibly between the area that is now Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, and the UK. Possibly so far as going to France and Poland, depending on the age. But if you go later, you could go all the way to North America. Remember, there's the Templar Viking sword and armor within Rogue. Or you can even go so far as to go to Constantinople if you go far enough in the age, because they historically had raided all of that area. In theory, you could get the whole continent of Europe.
You could, but judging by a recent information from Ubisoft themselves, they have critically acclaimed that Odyssey is a fantastic game, it sold well, and I quote, it didn't have enough assassiny feel. They want more stealth, hidden blades, and hay bales. And judging by that information, they are not going to invoke any more naval combat from. So that leaves less Aegean combat in the Aegean Sea and more land base. And I don't think they'll do a same size map as Odyssey, which 20% of Odyssey's map is unplayable. It's literally a black wall, which not a lot of people notice till you actually do digging. So Odyssey's map is 20% smaller than what people believe. But I don't think they'll do one that big. I think they'll do one as big as Origins or a tiny bit smaller.
I trust Ash's team, who is we're expected to be putting this game out, to do naval combat well. He did naval combat well in Black Flag. He did naval combat well in Origins. But I could see, based on that wanting to get away from the naval combat. But if we push, for instance, I'm going on the assumption that Layla's going to be our protagonist and that she's going to end up using Berg's DNA to relive the Vikings. That's what I'm kind of expecting, because we know he's got Viking ancestry. She didn't kill him. And he's got ties with the assassin through Uprising and what happened with Juno. So I could see them not leaving him to die, even though he's killed many, 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 many assassins. He's the only one that knows for truth what happened in that cave, because Layla, there's no way Layla tells him.
I could see that as being a possibility, but I don't know, it's kind of a tricky one. I could see them as doing that, but on the flip side, when you go back to all the cutscenes in Odyssey, Berg knows what Layla's like, and that's with her angry outbursts coupled with her suffering really bad bleeding effect and the not spear, sorry, this
The Staff of Hermes Trismegistus.
that's the one. The Staff of Hermes is already affecting her because she's not pure Isu blood. So he's more of a. If he is taken into custody through the assassins to find more knowledge, he will also be a liability for Layla because he knows that Layla killed Victoria.
And I'm sure before going into that cave, he had a dossier on her from her time with Abstergo's historical tactical team.
Yeah, and he did mention, which is a key fact, which a lot of people may have overlooked because it's just a quick dialogue, that they were planning on getting Layla to find Atlantis. He did say something about like, you step in here now, but you would have had time to come here themselves. So Abstergo have a plan to bring Layla to Atlantis. So maybe Abstergo already knows where to go to next. They're chasing something that Layla's not telling the assassins.
Based on that quote, that makes sense.
So I think he's too much of a liability to Layla. And what's putting me off with him and Victoria as well, it's what's kind of getting me confused for the next game, is before you end the last DLC of Atlantis, and it is a spoiler, she asks Alethea to watch over Victoria. But if Victoria's meant to be dead, how can you watch over a dead body?
Do you think it might have something like, we know Alethea's consciousness is living in the staff,
Yeah.
like Consus lived in the prototype Shroud of Eden, like Juno lived in the Grand Temple.
Yeah.
So, but we know how Juno and Consus got into their pieces of Eden. We don't know how Alethea got into the staff. Is it possible her consciousness got traveled into the staff because she was killed by the staff?
That's what I was thinking. And I was thinking being killed by the staff, and which is why she got worried that Layla wasn't the chosen one. I think over time, Alethea's conscience what Juno was trying to do is absorbed into a new vessel, which is why she's worried Layla's not the right
It's
chosen one.
possible.
Which is why I think for Ragnarok, which I'm going to dub it Ragnarok, and this is a key thing I'm thinking of, in the mythological side of Ragnarok, it was a battle of the gods. And we know at
It's the
least,
end of the gods.
well, yeah, the end of the gods. And at the moment, theoretically, the gods on Earth are humans. At the moment, because Isu are gone. But the Isu, by Alethea, are coming back. They want to stop let things lie, and they want to come back and start interfering. And the end of the gods would be man, who has believed for years they are gods. So Alethea could be using Layla as a conduit to come back, interfere, and get history leveled out because this war between assassins and Templars is just burning a hole in history.
I'm drawing a blank on the name of the lady, but back in the 60s, there was a end of the world prophecy, an Armageddon prophecy. I want to say her name is either Janine Dixon or Joanne Dixon, something like that. But in February, I want to say February of 1962, she prophesized that the world would come to an end in 2020 because of a quote unquote apocalyptic war. So, what if they're playing the Assassin and Templar War, this, what they have now essentially said, chaos versus order? This war is them tying into that apocalyptic event like they did the Mayan apocalypse with the solar flare. And Layla is meant to, Alethea is trying to make Layla believe that she is what is supposed to stop that apocalyptic war.
Or is she meant to start the apocalyptic war?
It's hard to tell. I honestly don't like the idea of chaos versus order.
The thing is, on the chaos and order theory, from what I've been doing digging, because I'm kind of a book nerd and I've been doing so much research, it makes a lot of sense to call the Assassins versus Templars chaos versus order because the Templars want order through control.
But everything the assassins do feeds into chaos.
Because they want freedom through order through free will, which
Yep.
is chaotic because man's free will is detrimental to power and, well, anything really. So it is that kind of chaos versus order. Do we punish man and control them through power and order, or do we let them free to burn society? And Alethea says she's stepping in because it's time to stop on the sidelines, which, if you know as much lore through Juno and all that, they're meant to be in the grey, which is like the netherworld. So how can they come back?
I don't remember which civilization believed that was their afterlife, the Grey.
It's
Was it Etrusian?
I can't remember. From what I was reading the other day, the grey is like a blanket term. Instead of just having a set heaven, hell, afterlife, the blanket term in Assassin mythology is the grey is just the Isu netherworld. It's where Juno was trapped originally, was in the grey.
What basically, and I called that the in the podcast I just put out last week for her, was that the Grey was the term for the Grand Temple network, and then when she left and expanded into the internet, that was what John Standish called her presence in the internet, was the Grey. Guide me into the Grey, beloved.
So that could mean, is there more Isu in the grey, which means in Ragnarok, if Alethea wants to come back, are they going to try and find a conduit through the staff and
It's
Layla?
possible. I don't remember where the quote was, but there is some quote from Juno in one of the games where she alludes to having that there being other consciousnesses in the Grey. A lot of people, at least I originally turned that into her alluding to Desmond and Clay.
But there could be more.
There is in theory, there is a way that Desmond could come back because he died touching the pedestal, which is how Juno came out of the network. There is a theory that his body died, but their consciousnesses switched.
So he could still be alive and
So
kicking.
he could, in theory, be alive, but would need a host body.
Which is possibly what everything's actually leading up to. Maybe what Ragnarok could be setting out is an expansion to the modern day Odyssey was trying to set up. But with Aletha knowing that Layla isn't the right chosen one, then that must mean Layla was meant to be what Desmond was, a conduit for an Isu vessel.
When Juno left, she made a comment to Desmond's dead body. You've played your part. Now it's time for me to play mine. When they wrote 3, it was meant to be Desmond's end to release Juno. My thinking, and at least until, well, it kind of adds into the comic, but they had this Eve storyline, and Desmond was meant to find Eve to do whatever they were going to do. Some people have gone on and said, well, Layla's meant to be Eve because she's picking up his work. Well, if he's meant to be Adam and he released Juno, my theory is that Eve would have been the person to kill Juno, Charlotte de la Cruz.
Who worked with Layla Hassan.
Yep, and Desmond's son, Elijah.
Ooh, getting juicy now.
Those two together is what killed Alethea, or not Alethea, Juno, because Elijah convinced Juno to talk to a coffee cup, and Charlotte stabbed her through the throat. And then Berg blew up the building.
Darn Berg.
Yeah.
So
Berg's been around.
So it's all tying in as best as it possibly can.
For what they can. I mean, I understand a lot of people mad the way Juno's ended, but it is what it is.
See, I think
I'm just glad it ended. They could have just left it there and just said, no, we're not even going to touch the story again.
I think the problem, and I think this is what it could also definitely lead into Ragnarok, which I've talked about quite a lot to people, is the critics and the critical information people were getting about Assassin's Creed was it was dying. And if a game is dying, there's no point carrying this gigantic arc if it's just gonna fizzle out.
And it was. With Unity and Syndicate, it was growing stagnant. The games needed something.
So it makes sense to put it into a new comic book, give it a new life to a wider audience, which is why I think a lot of this information people are discussing about, I'm going to keep calling it Ragnarok because it sounds cooler, is maybe we need to stop looking at pre-Syndicate information, but look at what Ashmel tried to do in Origins and what Quebec did in Odyssey, because Quebec worked with Ash's team in Origins. So what if, in theory, all we know about Assassin's Creed is twofold. One, the Syndicate is complete. That story is complete. Origins Forward is a new story building on the lore that previous games had built. So maybe we're not going to get anything that's going to tie in with 1, 2, 3, or even Black Flag. We're going to get something fresh, new, and a modern twist on what Origins started.
I agree, and I think the only thing that we would even touch on would be some of the very basic underlying systems like sailing or something like that, because you're not getting combat the same with the hitbox system.
Because really, in this day and age, I've been given the real name, thanks to a few fans. A puppeteer system in gaming is not a viable source for combat or exploration. And people like me have started to realize that Assassin's Creed isn't time travel. It's simulation of a memory. Athea says in Odyssey that it's time to press next on the next simulation. So they're already running. So the Isu are already running simulations.
That's how they use the Nexus to calculate their probabilities for the future.
So it could mean that the next game is just another simulation from Aflia and other Isu consciousness. Maybe it's now time to build a resistance against chaos and order. And Layla started it in Origins by defecting from Templars to Assassins. So she's order and chaos at the same time. And
Mm,
then in Odyssey
I
became a conduit.
I don't know if I'd go as far as saying she's Order and because she wasn't a Templar. She just worked for Abstergo and knew Sophia.
But from her Wikipedia entry, she did a lot of stuff that the Templars would have done. She never.
Oh,
So
yeah.
my logic for her is she may never have been fully affiliated with the Templars in what they were doing, but they were training her to be that way, which is why Berg says you were going to be coming to Atlantis anyways. So they were training her, and
She was just not bright enough to realize it.
when you read why she was in Cairo, it was because she was working with a youth organization to stop an uprising from, I can't remember the person's name, in Egypt, which is essentially control through power, which is a Templar thing. She was trying to control the youths into an uprising to beat the.
Oh, that's right. She was trying to be part of was it the 2011 Egyptian? Oh goodness, what they had an uprising that was almost a full blown revolution.
Yeah, and she worked with the youth organization in there to try and help build the revolution, something Templars would do to try and keep control by amassing power. And
Gotcha.
at the moment, she's been affiliated with the Brotherhood, but she actually isn't Isu blood. She has no Isu blood, so she doesn't have eagle vision naturally. She just suffers from bleeding effect. So she's got natural Templar training, through, whether she likes it or not, she's been trained, plus a bleeding effect from Assassin. She's order and chaos in one vessel, a perfect conduit for a field.
Which makes sense for Alethea wanting to use her to bring balance.
Exactly, because she's both sides of the coin. But something that people keep getting angry about, but it plays vital in what could be next, is in her wiki entry, she is prone to angry outbursts that she doesn't realize, meaning she may not be the perfect vessel to be ending the war, but actually starting the war.
Oh, that's possible. Like it makes sense from what Alethea was talking about after she went to relive Demos's interrogation of the sculptor, because that's when she killed Victoria. And like maybe we just don't get enough time with her, with Layla, but her stubbornness and her rashness has caused two deaths of two doctors, Victoria and goodness, I can't remember the name of the other one in Origins.
Her friend who was in the hotel room.
Yeah, it was in her ear, always,
Uh,
always about her vitals. I don't remember her name. I can. We don't get enough time with her to really like her. All we see is the negative effects. I think if we had more time with her, we might like her, but I don't see that happening. I see her turning into an antagonist.
which I think is kind of vital now. Please tell me if I'm wrong or I'm being silly, but one of the biggest reasons Rogue succeeded was because we played the other side of the coin. We played Templar. We're an assassin turned Templar because of how bad the Brotherhood is. But time after time, Assassin's Creed is always about victory. We're assassins, we succeed. But what if what Ragnarok wants to achieve is we're meant to be having this vessel who's going to help balance order and chaos because one side can't win. Her body keeps being rejected by her own animus. We know that from Origins. She's addicted to the animus. We know that from Odyssey, and she's prone to violence, which we know that from Odyssey as well. So what if we're not getting a protagonist to stop a war in Ragnarok? She's going to defect and become a rogue agent, trying to bring balance with the Isu, but she's going to destroy it all because that's who she is. She's clever, she's bright, she's prone to violent outbursts, she's easily manipulated by the animus because she's addicted to it. And I think that's why Alethea was scared that she's not the right chosen one because she's too damaging. And if If Thea is pro-humans, and there's more Isu in the Grey that are against humans, they could manipulate Layla to being on their side, allowing her to explore the Animus more through her own free will.
One thing that I've learned from Juno and Minerva, Minerva might have been pro-human, and Juno not, or Khan. So, but they both lied and manipulated. Juno more so than Minerva, but I can see Alethea being the same way. They're used to having human slaves, even if they don't want to admit it. That's what they're used to, and they're going to work towards either finding a way to coming back or just getting slaves again. I don't know much about Norse mythology. I know about Thor and Loki and Odin and Sleipnir and things of that sort. I know a little bit about Ragnarok, but I couldn't tell you everything about it. I don't know how Ragnarok is supposed to have begun. What if they call this Assassin's Creed Ragnarok and we are trying to figure out what Ragnarok truly is so Layla can start it or stop it in the modern day? I mean, that would fit to a mythological sense.
I kind of know a bit, this is going to sound so nerdy, about why Ragnarok started. I think, given how Layla was built, Layla could be the one that starts Ragnarok. Because Ragnarok was started by Loki, who was upset by how his father Odin had treated him. And I'm not going to go into it because it could be all day, but he created tons of children. One was like a horse, one was the world serpent, and all that
The world
rubbish.
Serpus, Fenris Wolf.
It's mad.
Yeah, he was the trickster goddess and always in a different guise and always acting like Zeus, essentially.
Judging by how, if Layla is angry, prone to outbursts, easily manipulative, all it would take is an Isu representation of Loki to trick Layla to start in Ragnarok, which would be the fall of the gods, because there is bound to be someone in the Grey that doesn't want Alethea bringing the Isu back to help humans. There's bound to be another side that doesn't want to come back to help humans, but actually come back to rule against humans.
It's probable. It's unlikely that Juno would have been doing this alone with Aida, and there's no point in it being Aida, or Juno wouldn't have had a single reason to create the sages.
So maybe there's something larger at play. Like I've always stated for a little while now, because I'm kind of crazy, that the Assassins vs Templar Order isn't what we think it is. It's actually just a big chess game, and someone's playing the pieces. Because if they get
We
humans
just don't know who. Yeah, that makes sense.
if they get humans to wipe themselves out, then the Isu can come back, clap their hands together, recreate humans, and realize, well, hang on a minute, let's not give them this. Let's change the coding to this. Let's do this and make sure they cannot rebel again. And I do honestly believe that somebody wants the assassins to basically win, or the Templars to win, to destroy the world. And it's why Pythagoras knew about all this, and it's why Lethean wanted him to give up the staff, because he knew too much.
I also think Pythagoras suffered from a type of bleeding effect because I don't think he had a lot of Isu DNA. I think he was just a human who the staff gave long life to, and that the Isu DNA that went into Cassandra was from Leonidas, was from Marini.
Which would make a lot of sense.
I honestly think the spirit Leonidas was created for a very specific Isu, and that Isu's bloodline is the only thing that could create the abilities that we had. So Cassandra with the spear abilities because of it being a piece of Eden. Or it's just all jacked up from Layla's animus and very old DNA.
Yeah, honestly, it's a murky one, but I am starting to believe that people are going to fall out for it, and I think Ash is going to do his best to hold the reins. But because Assassin's Creed has created a divide between reality and fiction to the point where you play Origins and you're playing a perfect representation as best you can get of ancient Egypt, but you need as much mythology as you can get because well, that's the Isu. You can't.
And you see it. You see it with him fighting the giant snake in his mind, and always talking about Apep and Sobek and all the other Egyptian gods. He was Bayek was by far the most religious protagonist that we've ever had.
And I am starting to think with how a lot of the Viking people worship the gods, I am honestly believing that they're going to be making a big impact in the game. Just how
In Ash, I trust.
I do as well. I trust him a lot, but I really don't trust that he's just going to overlook such a ripe culture for mythology that could have a really well balanced Isu knowledge, because everyone hates Odyssey for certain reasons, but they're not looking at the fact that Ash is the one that helped Quebec make it. So Ash is building up an Isu storyline for modern day, be it Layla going crazy, God's coming back. I'm just probably hypothetically guessing. But when you go to this Viking time, and we know the Eagle Vision was called Odin's Sight, which is already a big nod to mythology, they can't just ignore it.
Oh, I agree. And if I can't wield Mjolnir or Odin's spear, you're missing out on something.
See,
I don't care if it's like a 6-foot hammer or a little bitty ball peen hammer. Give me Thor's hammer.
see, I personally could see them doing that as an Easter egg sort of thing. He's a hammer, and we call it Mjolnir, and it does nothing. It's just
Oh yeah,
an Easter egg.
it could just be a little hammer, like one of the. I don't remember if it's an Odyssey or well, both Odyssey and Origins. The name of the weapons had so many Easter eggs in them. Like some of them touched on Game of Thrones.
I saw that. It was kind of epic. So I think that's really where Ash could go with it next. Like, I trust him everything, and it's going to be a mind blowing game. I know that for a guarantee. But I think it's going to have some heavy, heavy Viking and Norse mythology implications. I think could probably
Well, I
see.
think they have to. They did a lot with in Odyssey, but they did. I don't think they took it far enough. Like I have a very hard time connecting with someone in ancient Greece who did not believe in the gods.
Yeah, that's not
Because to
possible.
me that just kind of like you see Barnabas and how he is always God's this, God's that. That's how I picture life in the ancient Greece. Everybody like that, not like Cassandra going, yeah, maybe not. Just
Right.
hard to follow. It was just a pain.
It
Like I
was.
didn't believe it.
We're also talking about time where science was new. This isn't science is something you can
History was new. I mean, Herodotus was the first historian.
exactly. So the idea that gods and monsters are completely bull and they can't be real is kind of a bit daft. You know what I mean?
Like I could see her starting to feel that way after fighting the Minotaur and finding one of the artifacts, the Sphinx, or let's see, Cyclops. There were 3 Cyclops in that game. Oh goodness, what was the other one? Medusa. Like I could see that. I mean, but she gets the sword of Damocles, and it's a sword of Eden.
And you can't deny that.
No,
That's a sort of eating. Come on.
like I can understand her eventually getting there, but she starts out that way, and the way we're introduced to her, she's got no magic powers from her spear. We get there after starting to level up.
Which is kind of epic from what we get. Maybe if we don't get, actual physical representations of the gods, maybe a world that has been touched by the gods, another Olympus project.
Oh yeah,
Oh, I love
Olympios or Anthropos. I pronounced it right last week with Juno, but basically the creation of the humans. Oh goodness, now I've drawn a blank. You touched on Odin's Sight.
Yes.
This is the whole age. They're called assassins within the Fate of the Gods. That was before Odyssey recoined the term and basically said the assassins didn't exist until about 1090 when Haba Isiban, I can't pronounce his name, basically took Alamut Castle and said, here I am. And then the Templars didn't exist until like 1132, 39 with the Council of Troy creating them as the public face of the Templars. It doesn't matter where we live in the Viking era, we're going to essentially be called Hidden Ones, or possibly some other group, but that's kind of what we're going to look at, is because we know the Hidden Ones were there, the Assassins aren't yet a thing, so it's either going to be a group of named something, but Odinsight. So they're probably going to call it Odinsight thinking about it because they're not typically known for eagles. I was doing some looking about eagles in Norse myths because I thought, well, I saw a thing on Reddit and there was a conversation about what if we connect with a raven instead of an eagle, which makes sense. Odin's eyes on Midgard were Higgin and Minnan, right?
Yeah.
But what I found was that there are actually a couple eagles in Norse myths. There is, I'm going to butcher their pronunciation. There's Vero Folnir. Now he sits on top of Yggdrasil, the world tree, on there's an unnamed eagle that sits on him. And if you look back at the leaked, quote unquote leaked, but fake achievements, there is one for upgrading a Verdfernir. Now, there's a chance that's the name of your boat. We take any part of these faked achievements as truth. There is also Hersvilger, who was a giant that takes the form of an eagle and was also the symbol for strength and death, or the eagles were. So there are eagles within myths of Norse myths, like Sinu. He's a Banali eagle, most likely modeled after the Bennu bird, which was supposed to be the Ka of Ra. And then, of course, Icaros, the myth flying too close to the sun. So what if I did some looking on what possible eagles live in the area? There is the golden eagle, which is the same species of eagle as Sinu, but there was also the whitetail eagles. So we could get a third different type of eagle. I was trying to think of what name it could have. There is it's called Frigga. Well, not Frigga, but Frylga, Fylgja, which was a supernatural being or a spirit which accompanies a person in connection to their fate or fortune, which to me screams, I'm your eagle companion.
It would make sense for an eagle to be come back, especially with how Odyssey and Icarus had that big, eagle bearer look to it. Senu was it was the most notable feature of Bayek, and
It was the biggest change of going from the eagle vision to an actual eagle.
I do have a belief that there might not be any eagles in the game. The reason I've been thinking about this, eagle vision is the sixth sense, which I believe that before by X time, they used the sixth sense to see what an eagle sees. If you ever know Aragon, where you can see through the dragon's eyes, something similar to that used in the sixth sense, but they kind of realize it's a bit conspicuous, summoning a bird everywhere. So they learn how to hone the skill into your five senses of sight, smell, hearing,
And then
and
the sixth being knowledge.
knowledge. And I think for a Viking time, I think it'd be a bit daft in my eyes for a Viking warrior to be standing by a battlefield because they generally believe death in battle was better than death at home.
Yep.
And I couldn't see them being, you know what, I'm a big butch Viking dude. I live for the battle. I'm going to stand on the edge of a map, on the edge of a fortress, summon my bird, see what he sees, and then I'll go
And then
stealth.
sneaky get in there.
Yeah, so I could see that the Viking might be more embracing traditional eagle vision, because from my research that I've done prior to this, the hidden ones evolved on their own diversity, and then, as you said before, 1190, the old group together and created the Assassin Order, which was the first ever unification of all the hidden ones. So every hidden one would have acted differently. So some may still use an eagle, but maybe the Vikings find a way to use it in battle without actually throwing a bird up by actually meditating and using all six senses. And then in
And,
battle, they could sense where enemies are hiding. If they're doing a raid and they want to get a key piece of information, they could use this new sense to find what they're looking for. And it would mean that they wouldn't have to stand there in a boat, throw a bird in the air, wait till it finds something. It still keeps it with their honor of battle.
it makes sense, especially if you continue putting them closer into with their mythology and their, oh goodness, I'm drawing their civilization, because you're right. They thought that a death in battle was the only way to get into Valhalla. And I would like to see Valhalla be like an Isu city,
That'd be epic.
kind of like we saw with Elysium in the underworld and Atlantis. I want to see more Isu. Like, I would love to see a return of Jupiter, but they think he's Odin,
That would be cool.
because like you see a lot of Jupiter and Zeus and Odin and Thor, but there's just so much crossing over in there that we could either get new Isu or old Isu. But there is absolutely a great way that they could monetize the skin by giving you Sleipnir, by giving you I think there's one myth where Thor rides a goat. So they could give you all of these different skins and weapons that could turn out to be pieces of Eden or not. If I truly believe that if you're going to put a piece of Eden in a Norse game, it's going to be Thor's hammer.
Yes.
Like, I don't know how you build off the Spear of Leonidas and making it the reason you have special abilities as doing Thor's hammer.
It would be a tricky one. And
As long as we don't play Cassandra with the Staff of Hermes, I'll be all right.
But I do think, on one note that is slightly overlooked by a few people, including me, there is one elephant in the room when it comes to the next Assassin's Creed that could make or break the game completely, especially with Isu. And that is God of War. Because with everything we've talked about, we've got the building blocks to an amazing Isu oriented game with deep factual knowledge for the series. But at the same time, you will have a lot of fans sitting there complaining about how it looks like a God of War ripoff. No matter, which I think is going to be the struggle point for the next game, because we want heavy Isu. We need heavy Isu from what they're trying to build off in Odyssey. But at the same time, how do we push it away from a God of War?
Right. How do you put in Ragnarok without drawing those comparisons to you can't really make a new game and then say, oh, the only difference is that Loki was here and not your son.
Yeah.
You have things like the Jotuns and the Dark Elves. Like, if we can get, I'm going to admit, a lot of my Norse mythology comes from what I've looked at after watching a Marvel movie.
That's brilliant.
But like, I know there is no, like, there's nothing, at least I know, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that Malekith isn't part of Norse mythology, but his race is, the Dark Elves. So you have the dwarfs and the dark elves and the light elves and the frost giants, and I feel like there's more because I think it goes to 7. But there's Midgard and the Aesir, which were the Asgardians, and then there was one more, but they weren't, like Frigga being a wood elf, or not a wood elf, a wood spirit. Hey, Juno could end up being Frigga, for all we know, the queen of the gods.
Yeah, I could see that.
So it could be interesting to see how they tie it all in. I'm excited for it, but at the same time, I'm kind of going, you have to be careful with that not looking like a clone. And I think it's the same argument if they did a Wild West Assassin's Creed. They'd have that comparisons with Red Dead Redemption.
And feudal Japan, which I know is coming to Assassin's Creed. It's been confirmed.
Eventually it's got to, yeah.
It's been confirmed. I know it's happening. I'm betting £100 that it's happening. I've been told it's happening. But that's going to draw comparisons to Sucker Punch's new Ghost of Tsushima.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, before 2007, the only historical games you got were World War II shooters, and now everybody's going there. Well, the first God of War might have been out by then.
But also,
because that was a PS2 game.
The biggest comparison for Assassin's Creed 1, which is a little Easter egg not a lot of people know, but it was in an Easter egg, honestly, Prince of Persia.
Easter egg, spiritual successor, however you want to call it.
I think there's a mission in honestly called Blind Prince of Persia. Come on.
Yeah. That was Axioxerxes, part of the Blind King, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's kind of like, Prince of Persia. Even the blooming Dagger of Time is in the first DLC. Kid you not.
Is it?
Yeah, there's a dagger in the first DLC. When you look at the skin, it looks a lot like the Dagger of Time. I kid you.
I'll have to look a little harder on that. I've only played through Odyssey once, but that's because I put 200 hours into it to 100% it and wanted to move on.
It's in the second episode of the first DLC. It's a hard one to see, but I've got a picture of it on my phone somewhere. It's the funniest one I've ever seen.
That's the Sands of Time dagger, right?
Yeah. Heck, if you even know where to look, Spear of Leonidas is in the last boss battle of Origins. If you know where to look.
Oh, with the Hercutales, the 100-hand monster thing?
I think so, yes. Oh, no, Flavius.
Oh, Flavius, okay. Yeah, that's what is really weird about like that last. Why were there so many clones of Cassandra? Like that whole Fate of Atlantis being based off of Alethea's memories and other Isu memories. We're just going to put Cassandra in there for flavor, messing with your head because you're playing Layla, reliving a simulated life of Cassandra, who is playing a simulation based on Alethea's so-called memories. It's like Inception. Yeah.
A memory inside a memory, which just proves that the humans may believe they created the triple DNA helix technology for reading memories when it was actually the Isu who did it first.
I would agree that the Nexus and the Eye that they use to filter their calculations absolutely is a precursor to Animus tech.
It all ties in ways we are not really understanding.
No, it's not until you start saying it out loud that you go, wait a minute.
Which is why I constantly believe that Ash is making a new story. He's not continuing a storyline from 1 to how it is now. I hands down believe they're creating a pure Isu storyline from Origins to Ragnarok.
I'm excited. I think there's a lot of things that they can move on. I seriously think this is going to have a lot to do with more about the story of Ragnarok than a specific Isu artifact. Though that artifact might be what causes Ragnarok. There are so many pieces of Eden, like the pyramid, for instance, being brand new, and I still don't fully understand what it does.
Neither do I. It's an animus.
It is kind of like a nexus where they can view, but they don't view calculations or simulations. They truly viewed maybe not truly viewed the future, but we saw like Ezio in there. We saw a couple other assassins. So there's possibility that it could be something like that. I'm sure there are things in Norse mythology that would do something like that, or at least said to do something like that. Do you have anything upcoming that you want to promote?
I would love if people could message me on Facebook. Just Google my podcast name on Facebook. I'm trying to write a podcast on confirming that fiction and mythological beasts are 100% canon in the Assassin's Creed universe. which is a rocky path, but I am strongly holding out there that mythological beasts are 100% real, and we're going to get a unicorn in Assassin's Creed, and it'll be canon.
Instead of just the skin for the horse,
Exactly. I'm
Phobos.
holding out. Come on, dragons are
I
real.
think as soon as they gave us Minerva in 2, they said your myths are in one way or another real. And when they put the animus objects into creating minotaurs and medusas, they said your myths are real, just not how you think they are.
Exactly. Come on, people, get behind me.
I mean, they go through, even in Assassin's Creed, the first one, they talk about things out of the Bible, that Abraham's staff and the snakes parting the Red Sea, all being done by illusions in the apple.
See.
So yeah, I'm absolutely behind you on that.
Woo, I've got a backer.
Within this universe, one, even if we haven't seen it, your myths, somebody saw it somewhere, and either it was an illusion from an apple or a different piece of Eden, or they were making a story based on what they saw or what they thought they saw.
See, that's with you on that one. And I strongly believe, no matter how much, that it is possible.
So where can people find you on the internet?
Mainly, you can find me on Spotify and Google Podcasts and Castbeat, I think it's called, and Spreaker.
I want to thank you all for joining us today. Feel free, of course, to subscribe to Visions here. And if you have any questions about Assassin's Creed or any topics you'd like me to cover, please feel free to hit me up on Twitter at visions_AC, link to which will be in the description to the podcast. And till next time, my assassin friends, make sure to follow the creed. And to those Templars listening, may the Father of Understanding guide you.